Bismillah. Alhamdulillah. Wassalatu wassalamu ala Rasulillah wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in amma ba'd. We have two options bidhnillah with regards to our program and actually sticking to our itinerary. The first is to complete the commentary, reading from Ibn Rajab. We gave the commentary, the sharh, but reading from the classical commentary and sharh of the hadith of Uthman, the main theme of our topic, or we can see if we have any questions from the brothers or the sisters here, or those who may be online. Inshallah ta'ala, we have about half an hour before we're going to conclude our program this evening. Inshallah. So, once more, we're either going to read more or take a few questions that may be pertaining to the topic or off of the topic. What's going to be Abu Saleh? It's your decision.
Let's read more and we ask the questions tomorrow, inshallah.
Khairan, inshallah. Are there any questions online, Mahdi? Khairan, inshallah. Let's get started. Ibn Rajab, rahimahullah, he says, وَأَمَّا قَوْلُهُ مِثْلَهُ فليس المراد أنه على قدره ولا على صفته في بنيانه ولكن المراد والله أعلم أنه يوسع بنيانه بحسب توسعته أو يوسع بنيانه بحسب توسعته ويحكم بنيانه بحسب إحكامه لا من جهة الزخرفة ويكمل انتفاعه بما بني أو يبنى له في الجنة بحسب كمال انتفاع الناس ما بناه لهم في الدنيا ويشرف على سائر بنيان الجنة كما تشرف المساجد في الدنيا على سائر البنيان وإن كان لا نسبة لما في الدنيا إلى ما في الآخرة كما قال النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم ما الدنيا في الآخرة إلا كما يجعل أحدكم إصبعه في اليم فلينظر بما ترجع وقد دل على ما قلناه ما خرجه الإمام أحمد من حديث أسماء بنت يزيد عن النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم قال من بنى لله مسجدا في الدنيا فإن الله عز وجل يبني له بيتا أوسع منه في الجنة وخرجه بمعناه من حديث حجاج عن عمرو بن شعيب عن أبيه عن جدي عن النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم ومن حديث واثلة بن الأسقع عن النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم أنه قال من بنى مسجدا يصلى فيه بنى الله له في الجنة أفضل منه وخرج البزار والطبراني من حديث أبي هريرة مرفوعا من بنى لله بيتا يعبد الله فيه من حلال بنى الله له بيتا في الجنة من در وياقوت وقيل إن الصحيح وقفه على أبي هريرة. Ibn Rajab, he says, when the Prophet ﷺ says, or when he said, mithlahu, whoever builds a masjid for Allah, Allah will build mithlahu, something similar to it for him in paradise. Whoever builds a masjid for Allah, meaning in this dunya, Allah will build for him something which is mithl, similar to it for him in the afterlife. He says, then the correct meaning of this hadith, the correct understanding of this hadith, he says it is not this size. It isn't the size of the masjid that you build in this dunya. It doesn't mean, he says, it does not mean that if you build a small masjid in this life, Allah will build a small masjid for you in the hereafter. He says it doesn't mean that. It doesn't necessarily mean that if you build a big masjid in this dunya, Allah will build a big house for you in the hereafter. Not masjid, house, bait. He says it what? That's not what's meant here. That's not what? That's not what's meant. He says, nor does it mean the actual description of the house, of the bait. I built a house in America, for Allah's sake, the masjid is made out of stone. It doesn't mean that in the hereafter in paradise, Allah will build for me a house which is made out of what? Stone. Does not mean that. The sifa. Or it had 2 floors or 3 floors in the basement, in the yard. It doesn't mean it's going to be like that, what? In Jannah. That's not what's meant by this hadith. He says, however, the intended meaning is, he says, and of course Allah surely knows best, the intended meaning is that the expansion will be based off of how expansive it was, what? In this life. In other words, according to how much you spend and how much work you put in. He says here, and the precision, the beauty of the house, and how it was constructed masterfully crafted. That's how it will be for him what? In the hereafter. He says here, and also another very important point is how much the people benefited from this masjid. How much the people benefited from this masjid will have a very strong determining factor on what type of house you have in paradise, in Jannah. So you build a masjid for Allah's sake, in which you place knowledge, in which you promote and pump and propagate the sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ, and the correct fiqh, the proper understanding, helping the people, treating the people in a certain way, educating the people, serving the people, and it becomes a legacy. Then bid'nai ta'ala, that is going to have an effect on what you get in the hereafter. And the opposite is the opposite. Many of us, we may build masjids in which we don't have the necessary proper intentions, or we may not necessarily have the proper knowledge, and the masjid is just a shell, it's dead. There's nothing that's being taught, it's nothing that's being promoted, it's no true brotherhood. Oftentimes the masjid can be made for show. We built this, we made this, a big huge building, nah? And you go there for Salat al-Maghrib and it's only one car, what? In the parking lot. And this is a reality of many masjids. So the masjid being big or small is not the initial concern. If it's big, alhamdulillah, more people can come. No one's going to say build a small one intentionally. No. There's nothing wrong with having a masjid that's nice and clean. As far as the masjid which is adorned and beautified, then that's a different topic of discussion. That's a different topic of discussion. But a masjid that's nice and clean and it feels it's warm, it's welcoming. There's nothing wrong with that. But the most important thing is the quality of the service. Is that there's a qualified imam, a qualified brother. There's sisterhood in the masjid. There's knowledge in the masjid. There's no grave in the masjid, first and foremost. There's no bid'ah in the masjid. The masjid is not meant to be a means of political gain and agenda, personal gain and agenda. The minbar is not used as a weapon against people to talk about personal issues, but for the purpose of educating the people, enlightening the people. And if politics are being spoken about in the masjid, then it's for the purpose of the people being aware of what's going on around them. If sports are being discussed in the masjid, or a story or this and that, it's only for the purpose of brotherhood. And it's a concept of just social discussion. But it's not a sports center. The masjid is not a place for sports, initially. It's not a place for this one and for that one. It's a place for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So according to how much knowledge of these things you have, how devoted and dedicated you are, that is going to have an effect on the people's benefit from your masjid. Everybody understand this? From your what? The people's benefiting what? From your masjid. If the masjid is built in this manner, with the proper knowledge, the proper intention, the masjid will become a university. No doubt. The masjid will become a place in which we say, this young brother, this is the masjid he's from. He learned the Quran, he studied akhlaq, he studied boxing, martial arts, he learned how to play soccer. That's his masjid, that's where he's from. The imam was strong, the assistant imam was strong, the board, the brothers, the sisters. Everybody understand this? The sister, this young sister, she learned how to do all of the things that she needs to do in life right here in this one masjid. She learned her aqidah, she learned about hijab, she learned home economics, she learned all of these things, what, right? In a masjid. Everybody clear on this? A center. Everybody understand this? How much do people benefit from this house? He then says, وَيُشَرَّفْ عَلَى سَائِرِ بُنْيَانِ الْجَنَّةِ كَمَا تُشَرَّفُ الْمَسَاجِدِ فِي الدُّنْيَا عَلَى سَائِرِ الْبُنْيَانِ. Listen to this. He says, and also included in this hadith, is that the house that you get in paradise, it will be the noblest of all houses, just like the masjids are the noblest of buildings in this life. The debate in Jannah, that is a fruit and a product, a result of you building a masjid in this life, he says, to sharaf. It will be far nobler than all other houses in paradise. Why or how? Because the masjid is what? Far better than all what? Buildings in this dunya. Ahabbul biqa ila Allah al-masajid. The most beloved places to Allah are the what? The masjids. Everybody understand this? He then says, rahimahullah, even though there's no comparison with regards to the things in this world and the things in the next. There's no comparison in reality. As the Prophet ﷺ tells us, he says, "Mad dunya fil akhirah." He says, the worldly life compared to the hereafter is nothing more than what? For you to take your finger, your index finger, he didn't specify, your pinky finger, he says, isba. Let's say index finger, perhaps. For one to take his finger and put it in a pool of water. He says, fil yam, a river bank. He says, فَلْيَنْظُرْ بِمَا يَرْجِعُ. He says, look how much water comes back on your finger. What loss was done to the river, the lake, rather we say the pool. The what? The pool that you have in the back of your house. You stick your finger in, you pull it out. What? How much water what? Has the pool been depleted? No mentioning. Let alone a huge Olympic-sized pool. Collegiate-sized pool now. Let alone a lake, a river, a brook. Everybody understand this? Let alone the ocean. It's of no harm whatsoever. He says that's the comparison and reality of this life and hereafter. Just stop and think about that now. Everybody clear on this? He said, I dipped my finger in the river, and I put the water in a cup. Of what value is the water going to be in the cup? Everybody understand this? That is the reality of this life in light of the what? Of the next, if we only but know. If we only but know. He then says, another thing which proves the meaning that we just gave you is that it's not going to be exact. Is a hadith that's collected by Imam Ahmad from Asma bint Yazid that the Prophet ﷺ said, whoever builds a house for Allah in the dunya, Allah Azza wa Jal will build for him a house awsa'a minhu, bigger and more expansive for him. That's what's meant. Is that you're getting the reward of the sheer act of what? Building. And everything that comes after that is extra. The size, how strong, how beneficial it was for the what? For the people. But the original concept is the actual what? Concept of what? Just building. Everybody understand this? He says here, and he mentions a few narrations to support this. Now let's stop and let's ask ourselves. We've explained the hadith. What is the heart of the body of the Muslim community? Building it and maintaining it. There lies no doubt it's going to be the what? The masjid. That's where you're going to get to know your brother. That's where you're going to get to know your sister. That's where you're going to learn, study, teach. That's where your children are going to play around and grow up as Muslims. That's where, inshallah ta'ala, all of these different things of the society are initially put into existence. But in the light of spirituality. In the light of what? Spirituality. In the light of spirituality. So the masjid is considered to be the heart. And everything within that ta'ala is going to orbit and circle around that what? That heart. Everybody clear on this? Around that what? That heart. The masjid, the Muslims, they grow too much. We need a bigger building now. And we have a center. We have a basketball court. Now, as we said, we have a wudu station instead of just a sink. Then we have a janazah station where we can wash our bodies. Bidnai ta'ala wa hakadha. According to the means of the Muslims. According to the what? The means of the Muslims. So bidnai ta'ala, that is the main theme of the lecture. And it is based off of this hadith. Ibn Rajab rahimahullah ta'ala, he then says, regarding the part of the hadith in which Bukayr said, حَسِبْتُهُ أَنَّهُ قَالَ يَبْتَغِي بِهِ وَجْهَ اللَّهِ. When he said that, I think I heard him saying, he who builds a house seeking the face of Allah. He discusses this issue technically, and he says, وَبِكُلِّ حَالٍ فَالْإِخْلَاصُ شَرْطٌ لِحُصُولِ الثَّوَابِ فِي جَمِيعِ الْأَعْمَالِ فَإِنَّ الْأَعْمَالَ بِالنِّيَّاتِ وَإِنَّمَا لِامْرِئٍ مَا نَوَى وَبَنَاءُ الْمَسَاجِدِ مِنْ جُمْلَةِ الْأَعْمَالِ. He says here, وَبِنَاءُ الْمَسَاجِدِ مِنْ جُمْلَةِ الْأَعْمَالِ فإن كان الباعث على عمله ابتغاء وجه الله حصل له الأجر أو حصل له هذا الأجر وإن كان الباعث عليه الرياء والسمعة أو المباهاة فصاحبه متعرض لمقت الله وعقابه كسائر من عمل الشيء من عمل البر يريد به الدنيا كمن صلى يرائي أو حج يرائي أو تصدق يرائي. ولكن روي عن قتادة أنه قال كل بناء رياء فهو على صاحبه لا له إلا من بنى المساجد رياء فهو لا عليه ولا له. خرجه ابن أبي الدنيا بإسناد صحيح عنه. وهذا فيه نظر، ولو كان النفع المتعدي يمنع من عقاب المراعي به لما عوقب العالم والمجاهد والمتصدق للرياء، وهم أول من تسعر به النار يوم القيامة. He says here, no matter what the case is, whether the Prophet ﷺ said those words, or whether Uthman said those words, he who builds a masjid seeking the face of Allah, no matter what the case, he says, sincerity is a condition for righteous deeds being accepted. Regardless, that's agreed upon, that's indisputable, is that for your deed to be accepted by Allah, it must be done sincerely for Him, subhanahu wa ta'ala. Making salah, building a masjid, anything that you do of religious devotion has two conditions. If those conditions are not fulfilled, as if you didn't pray. If those conditions are not fulfilled, as if you didn't make hajj. If those conditions are not fulfilled, as if you didn't make Jumu'ah. The first condition is it has to be done according to Muhammad's way, the Sunnah. You don't have to be a scholar. You don't have to be an in-depth student of knowledge, a layman Muslim to learn the basics according to Muhammad's way. And secondly, it has to be done sincerely. It has to be what done what? For the face of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Khairan inshallah. So he says here, no matter what the case is, this is a condition for righteous deeds being accepted. These are only based off of intentions. And a person will get that which he has intended. Such as building a masjid for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He says, as far as building a masjid to show off, or to be heard, and to get a reputation and a name. Or he says, building a masjid in order to boast and to brag and to compete, as many Muslims do. Look at our masjid, it's bigger. Our masjid has more people. Our masjid is fancier, it's cleaner, it's nicer. Our masjid is from the ground up, yours is a rehabilitated house. You made a big masjid, so now we're going to make a bigger masjid. Even though there's nobody to stand in prayer, there's no one to fill the parking lot, but we're still going to build it. Everybody understand this? And I want you to know that Fulan ibn Fulan was the man of charity. This is reality. Or we're going to make our masjid fancy on the inside with more calligraphy, more colored rugs. We're going to make a new board, a bigger board, a better board, a more professional board. This is a reality. And we know that there are narrations in which the Prophet ﷺ is quoted to have said, the hour will not be established حَتَّى يَتَبَاهَ النَّاسُ فِي الْمَسَاجِدِ. He says the hour won't be established until the people boast and brag and compete with regards to the masjids. And we're not talking about competing in a good way. وَفِي ذَلِكَ فَلْيَتَنَافَسِ الْمُتَنَافِسُونَ. Allah tells us, let those compete for good deeds. But we're talking about just to show off and for it to be seen. Now, my masjid is on the calendar, yours isn't on the calendar. Now, our masjid is recognized, yours isn't. Or the concept of just splitting and breaking off. One community, one administration, they break up, they fight, they feud, and make another masjid, another masjid, another masjid. There was a place in New York City, in Queens, New York, without any exaggeration, in which there are two masjids that are directly next to each other. Without no exaggeration. I'm not talking about two more stores, no. Literally next door. Literally. Two masjids. Now, obviously, the people that say there's so many churches, churches everywhere. Churches what? Everywhere. Church. Two churches directly back to back. Maybe you might see that from time to time. Across the street for sure. 3 or 4 churches on the block for sure. But a church right next to another church, you may see that. But to see a masjid like that, 2 masjids, is appalling. But it's a reality. With that being said, Ibn Rajab rahimahullah ta'ala, he says here, as far as those who build the masjids for these wicked purposes, he says, then they will be exposed, they will be at risk of endangering themselves with the punishment of Allah, the anger of Allah, Allah's wrath. He just like anyone else who does these different acts. He says here, those who make hajj, those who make prayer, those who give sadaqah, and they're only doing it for the people to notice them and to recognize them. A very interesting issue is now, I want to ask a question, and that is, if somebody builds a masjid and they didn't do it for Allah. They did it to show off. Is there an exception to the rule? One who prays for other than Allah will be punished, without a doubt. But someone he builds a masjid, not for the sake of Allah, but he did it to show off. The normal rule is that he will be what? But besides the reward in this life, he will be what? He'll be punished. The main thing. Tayyib. But because building a masjid is so virtuous, does he get like a pass? In other words, it's not against him or for him. It's just blank.
Because the people will still benefit from it.
The people will still benefit from it. So you say he gets a pass.
He gets a pass.
Yeah, I still think he would benefit. I mean, the people gonna benefit.
Does he get a pass? No pass. Allahu Akbar.
Allahu
Allahu Alam. Anybody else? Salim, anybody else? You get a pass? Abdul Haq, you get a pass? Anybody?
There's no pass. What do you mean?
Meaning, once more. A person is what? Let's say you did something at your job, right? Let's say you did something at your job, right? And you violated some rules. And you would normally be fined or suspended without pay. Or, everybody understand this? But you worked for hours. So the boss, he says, I can't pay you for those 8 hours. Nor am I going to what? Dock you. I'm just going to do what? You just worked for 8 hours without no reward or punishment. Everybody clear on an example? You worked for 8 hours without what? Without nothing. No punishment, because you're supposed to be fined. We're not going to do nothing. Everybody understand this? You just forget about it. Because of your hard work and your loyalty to this job. Hey, well, you were here for some years, through thick and thin. We'll give you a what? A pass. But we can't pay you for that. We can't what? No way you're getting paid. And at the same time, we're not going to what? Dock you, punish you. Everybody understand this? Ibn Rajab, but the normal rule is that the person will normally get what?
Punished.
Dock. Take it. Everybody understand this? Here he says, Qatada ibn Di'ama, who is from the students of Anas radiallahu anhu, and from the most knowledgeable of these junior tabi'een, very learned with regards to the Quran, with regards to Hadith and things like this. Qatada, his name you read in the Tafsir ibn Kathir, he said, listen to this, how interesting this is. And it's going to solidify what we previously mentioned. He said that kullu bina'in, he says anyone who constructs and builds and it's riyah, is showing off, he won't get any what? Reward, for sure. فَهُوَ عَلَى صَاحِبِهِ لَا لَهُ. It will be a means of punishment. It means of what? Punishment. Anything else that you do. He says, except for building a masjid. If a person builds a masjid and he shows off, he won't get no punishment nor no what? Reward. He'll just get a what? A pass. As if he said, or as if he's saying or said, because building a masjid is so valuable and virtuous, even more than valuable. It's so golden, you get a pass. But you don't get a reward. Everybody clear on this? This was the statement of Qatada, who wasn't a Sahabi, but he was a follower of the what? Of the Sahaba. Ibn Rajab, listen carefully. He says, this is an authentic report from Qatada, who was from the pious predecessors. He says, وَهَذَا فِيهِ النَّظَرُ. He says, and we don't necessarily agree with this. This is something that needs to be investigated. He says, what? هَذَا فِيهِ إِشْ نَظَرُ. Some scrutiny with regards to this statement. He says, why is this? And that's because it's a benefit for the people. It's a benefit for the people. Naf' muta'addi. The benefit goes to other people. He built a masjid. He said valuable. He says if that was the case, then what about the person who's an alim, the scholar? What about the mujahid, the warrior? And what about the one who spends in the cause of Allah? What they did, was it not valuable to the people? Without a question. Yet still the hadith teaches us that they would be the first 3 people for whom the fire will be what? Made to be brought to a kindling blaze. So he says that's not necessarily correct. And if you build a masjid showing off and seeking fame of the people, it's the normal same rule as anything else. And that there's punishment. That there's what? There's punishment. Now, Bidnai ta'ala, this is very important for us to understand that, as we said before, when we say as a side benefit, is that the only one whose statement is an absolute proof and an absolute dalil is Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam. Is what? Is Muhammad. So Ibn Rajab, the author, he's using a hadith to show that this statement of this tabi'i is not so what? Correct. So he's not a sahabi. Tabi'i. That this statement is what? It's not so correct. So it goes to show and it goes to prove is that it is inaccurate for me to take an isolated statement for someone, or even from the Prophet, an isolated statement, not the proper understanding of it, let alone for someone afterwards, and use that to make that my what? My hujjah, my dalil, as many people do. That's scientifically incorrect, as we can clearly see this. And Ibn Rajab, he was of the 8th century, hundreds of years ago, before this one, that one, so you can't say, and you can't say that. Also, this isn't coming from what? Muhammad ibn Munir. Everybody clear on this or not? Classical sharh of one of the greatest ulama of that century. He says, وَهَذَا فِيهِ نَظَرُ. What this person said was from the tabi'een, from the pious predecessors, is not absolutely so what? Correct. And the hujjah is in the ijma', the consensus. What the pious predecessors agreed upon unanimously. And someone goes against, we say, هَذَا ضَلَالٌ. That's misguidance. But an individual statement of one person here and there is not a what? It does not hold legal weight. We read the statement, we can benefit from it, perhaps we can use it, but it does not hold what? Hujjiyah. And that's a scientific error that many people they make. Everybody clear on this? The ulama of Islam, they argue and they differ on the statements of the Sahaba. Is a Sahabi's statement a proof or not? Let alone a tabi'i. Everybody clear on this? And it's also incorrect scientifically to take the statement of one tabi'i and then say, هَذَا فَهْمُ السَّلَفِ. هَذَا مَذْهَبُ السَّلَفِ. This is the understanding of the pious predecessors. The understanding of the pious predecessors cannot be taken from what? One person. Everybody clear on this? But it has to be taken from the what? Either consensus or overwhelming majority. And we have nothing else to go against it. We have 5 or 6 athar, and we have nothing to what? Go against it. But one person's statement or view does not prove that that's the opinion of what? That's utmost stupidity. For some, one person in South Carolina say, this is what I think things should be. And I go back to the north and I say, that's the opinion, that's the way of what? You would laugh at it. So the same applies to the what? To the deen. And that's something that's caused a great deal of harm to the Muslims. This backward, twisted understanding. Everybody understand this? And the only way for us to get out of what we're in and what we've been in for these years is to break this incorrect way of thinking. And then after we've broken it and shattered it, then we have to do what? Rebuild. You have to do what? We have to rebuild. Everybody clear this or not? And this is one of the early precepts. One of the earliest precepts of that which is called and known as ad-da'watu salafiyya. The Salafi da'wah in the early 90s, mid-90s, one of the most well-known statements of its tenets was at-tasfiyah wa tarbiyah. At-tasfiyah wa tarbiyah. To cleanse, to purge, and then to cultivate. In other words, you have a garden. Before you can build a peach tree or a plum tree or a pear tree, before you can have figs, you have to do what? You have to get rid of all of the weeds. You have to get rid of the rodents. You have to get rid of anything that's going to destroy your crops and strangle your crops and roots. Then once you've purged it, then you do what? Tarbiyah. Now you have to cultivate it now. The soil. Make the gate. You have to put up this glass, this window to keep this out, to keep that separated. You put the stick on the branch when it's weak until it grows strong. Hakadha. So you have to get rid of that which does not what? Belong. You have to get rid of that which what? Doesn't belong. That's not a part of Islam. This hadith is fabricated. This is culture. That's baseless. Even though the Muslims have been doing it for 500 years, 700 years, maybe 1,000 years, but it is not proven in the orthodox sources of Islam. So that's the tasfiyah. It has to be what? Purged. Islam has to be purged from those false practices and ideas. Let's take an example of this. Honor killings. Or my wife has to walk 10 feet behind me. It's practiced by many Muslims today. And that's baseless in the deen. No foundation whatsoever. So before we move forward, we have to do what? We have to get rid of that idea that has no validity in the deen. Then we have to learn the etiquettes of a man and a wife, husband and wife, so on for tarbiyah. Everybody understand this? This was in the early 90s, mid-90s. And if you watch the lectures, read the articles, read the books, there's no doubt this word, it mysteriously just vanished from the vocabulary of the people who said that they were following this dawah. It did. When was the last time you heard the word tasfiyah with tarbiyah? When was the last time you heard that word in a lecture or an article or a book? In the early 90s, that was a staple slogan. Tasfiyah and tarbiyah. To remove the bad and to cultivate and nurture upon the what? Authentic. And if you don't believe me, then do what? You can what? You read it yourself. We're making this up, Sheikh? This, you heard it all the time. Tasfiyah tarbiyah, tasfiyah tarbiyah, tasfiyah tarbiyah. And it goes to show and prove something. That something seriously wrong happened. A major glitch in that span of time. Everybody understand this? So we have to get rid of this we have to go back to this principle of tasfiyah and tarbiyah. The backwards way of thinking has to go out the window. The backwards practice has to do what? Go out of the window. The weak hadiths, the bogus narrations have to go. The cultural practices that clash with the sunnah have to go. The bid'ah has to go. The ignorance, the gang mentality has to go. The slavery, the mental slavery of the people and thinking like that has to what? Has to go. But there's still not enough now. Now we have to rebuild, reconstruct. We have to fill our minds, our hearts with ilm, fiqh, the hadith, the aqeedah, the tawheed, the akhlaq, the adab. Everyone understand this? It's not enough to get rid of the bad, but we now have to do what? With only authentic though. You got rid of everything that should have been in your garden. Now you have to put in the seeds and the water and a good, rich soil and look after it. And bi'idhnillahi ta'ala, that is going to produce something that is very, very substantial. If we go back to the simple 1-2 punch, jab and a cross, tasfiyah, tarbiyah. Getting rid of the nonsense, establishing the sense. Everybody understand this? Cleaning the dirt, and then putting the potpourri down on the carpet, and the incense and the bukhor. But you can't do that. You can't put on deodorant and perfume if you haven't washed. Everybody understand this? You have to clean yourself first. Then you what? Perfume yourself. Allah Azza wa Jalla surely knows best. Indeed, this isn't hard for Allah to do, to bless us with this. It is not difficult for Allah Azza wa Jalla to give that which we ask Him for. We ask Allah Azza wa Jalla to allow us to return to tasfiyah and tarbiyah for ourselves, our families, and our communities. And one of the first steps of tasfiyah and tarbiyah is ilm nafi', ilm of the sunnah. Walhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen.